on the line by Deputy Ranking Member on the Finance Committee, Member of Parliament for Bolga Central, Honorable Isaac Adongo. Thank you very much for your time. Good morning to you.
Good morning to you, and good morning to your listeners.
I guess I can say a Merry Christmas to you at this point.
Well, this is a funeral Christmas. Yesterday, our country died. As a Ghanaian and understanding what is going on, I feel very, very saddened about what has happened to the country.
You said yesterday our country died.
Yes, effectively.
Explain.
What the finance minister did yesterday was to drive the final nail in the coffin. What it means is that for so many years, Ghana would remain a failed country, and a country that the global and the domestic financial community would be extremely afraid to give a penny to support government programs. Not even Obama will find it easy to run this country going forward after what happened yesterday. And that is a very sad commentary on our economy. Basically, what he investors' money, that they trusted our country, they trusted our sovereignty, they trusted the collective ability of all 30 million Ghanaians to be truthful to their investment and to protect their investment and to respect the covenants that they signed with us when they were giving us their money. 400 billion. In return, he is celebrating an effort to sign onto the demon that they always called the IMF for $3 billion. That is a very sad moment for our country.
But is it not normal that if you owe somebody and you find yourself in very difficult situations that you do not predict, you go back to that person and say, I am unable to pay your debts at this time. Please give me some time to find a way of doing that. Is that not what he did yesterday?
So, just a couple of months back, you were still signing on to loans. You were still taking people's monies. In fact, just last year, you went back to the Eurobond market and took $3 billion. This cannot be a surprise. At a time when, in 2019, you were spending 91% of your total revenue to service debts, it was quite clear that you had reached a stage where you needed to pull back and cut down extensively on your expenditure. If you borrow somebody's money to fund activities that you do not have money for, and you realize that you are moving into a territory where your economy will not be able to support it, what you do is that you cut your coat. You sit down, you cut the 125 ministers to a number that you can manage. You collapse certain ministers and merge the ministries and merge them. Of course, I don't see how we should have Ministry of Transport, Ministry of Aviation, and Ministry of Railway Development in a situation where you are so broke that you can't even make ends meet. And you were still funding this. So it's not as if you were collecting the money to fund anything tangible and reasonable. You were funding this level of waste in your government. And you had done that consistently when it was 91%. By 2020, you were spending 129% of your total revenue to service debt. In other words, when you spent all our money to service debt, you still needed to borrow 29% more in order to be able to service your debt. And you were still in the market in 2021, deceiving investors and taking $3 billion from them, only to turn around a year later and say that I cannot pay. And I am not able to even engage you. All I did is to say, look, I am going to suspend payments. If you want, we are ready to engage you. Listen to the last paragraph of the release. It says that government stands ready to engage creditors. In other words, I will not pay you anymore. If you want, engage me. Is that how you treat people's money that you take from them? Now the sovereignty of Ghana is worth a useless piece of paper. And that sovereignty is what has been relied on by this country over the years to seek support from investor community in order to develop our country. Now that is gone. No government in the next 10 years would be able to take money from any investor. And if we will, the investor would have to price into this bond that you issue in future the possibility, in fact, not just the possibility, but your penchant for failure and for default. What that means is that if you issue a bond for 5 years or 10 years, the coupon might be so high that the investor is able to recover his money even before the 5 or 10 years. That is the prospect that we are facing with this group of people. Quite clearly, yesterday I sat down and asked myself, how did Ghanaians fall for this scammers? How? How on earth did we fall for this? That we basically brought armed robbers into the kitty to rob the country, and not just our money, but actually treat investors and their monies with this level of shame. I cannot imagine it. I simply cannot imagine it.
Listen to you, a couple of things come to mind. You're still. I remember the last time I spoke to you, you talk about the approach they are using. That you do not make an offer and invite investors to come and take that offer or come and sit down with you, but you sit down with them and reach an agreement with them. Would you have avoided a situation where we'll be announcing a default if we are sat down with the investors to reach an agreement first?
So it was quite clear to us that we didn't have the money to pay our debt service for a greater part of this year. We had close to $2 billion of debt service that was hanging, that we simply could not pay because we don't have the dollars to pay. Then, by December, we knew that December will be the Waterloo of this country, because that is the moment when, at worst, we needed to settle bills that were owed to investors. This government has resorted to printing money in order to serve it, in order to pay for the domestic debt. And you recall on the floor of Parliament, and if you had been monitoring social media, I did a press conference where I accused the governor of the central bank of lending 70 billion Ghana cedis to the government. The governor issued a statement basically disputing what I said, but ended up indicating that they had actually given 91.8 billion to government. That statement had a table, and the table showed that the total amount of money that the government was owing them was 91.8 billion illegally given to the government of Ghana. Obviously, they were printing these monies, but now with the external debt, the challenge is that you can print the cedis, but you cannot pay with the cedis. You must pay with the foreign currency. So externalizing the cedis in order to set the currency was their biggest problem. The Bank of Ghana doesn't have the dollars. They themselves don't have the dollars. There is no dollars in the economy for the central bank to borrow or to go and buy. So eventually they had to tell the investor, instead of telling the investor that we have a problem with settling our 2022 obligations to you, you just write a letter saying that we have suspended that payment. And that is it. I've never seen this kind of arrogance in dealing with people's money. If somebody borrowed money from Data Bank, and on the stroke of the pen, Ken Oforiasta saw in the news that the man says that I have suspended the payment of my debt to Data Bank. I'm sure this morning, if they won't be in the police station, you would have seen them lock up that office and seize properties of the bank, of that person, in order to defray their debt. That is the reality of what he's done. But for other investors, what he's saying is that, look, I don't care how you behave. I am not going to pay you anymore. If you want, come and let's talk. That is the arrogance. And I can't see any group of people treat the international capital market community the way this government has done. And I'm waiting to see the repercussions, because there are very hostile fans across the globe that have a way of dealing with these kind of governments. And often these hostile funds are owned by what we call the vulture funds. And what they do is that they will make your country ungovernable. They will make sure that your country ceases to be part of the global community because they must get their money, and they will do anything they have to do in order to get their money, including seizing your assets abroad, including manhandling your president when he travels abroad, including making sure that any funds you have sitting in any account abroad is seized. Those vulture and hostile funds, I pray, do not get angry and go on the market and ask all investors to bring their bonds for them to buy them so that they will deal with the government of Ghana. If that happens, Ghana is doomed. And Ken Oforiatta and Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia and the like, they don't care anymore. They just want to be able to crawl their way out of 2024 and leave a damaged economy and a damaged Ghana without credibility for us to determine what we'll do with it. They would have been gone. That is the reality of the thinking of these group of people that we have given them our power.
Those are very dire consequences you're talking about. Seizing assets, including even bank accounts that we have, that even our president could suffer if he travels abroad, among others. And you say they do not care because they still have 2 years to go.
Well, they are so ignorant that they don't even know the consequences of what they are doing. And these are Yale trained. You know, we have always questioned how somebody with SOPs and Fs ended up at Yale. But this is the result that we are seeing, that this Yale trained is not a good ambassador and doesn't tell a good story of that great university. And I am very, very sad. Listen, I am just saying that we should pray that hostile funds, vulture funds, don't get angry with our country and go on the market and acquire all our bonds. If they do, and they have the financial muscle to suffer it and deal with us, if they do, we are in trouble.
But he also had an appeal for those of you in Parliament. And you've already indicated you are opposed to the increase in VAT, among others. But you're saying this may not be the time to be opposing such measures. It could be dire for Ghana. What do you say?
What he's done is already worse for Ghana. Dire will be better than worse, right? The dire will be better. Listen, why do we approve money for you, only for you to continue the same way of life that led us here? Why do you think that we should approve e-levy and additional money for your e-levy, additional money for VAT, only for you to waste it the way you are wasting our money? You should have demonstrated this by downsizing your government. You have it. In 2022, you indicated in your budget that you were going to save Ghana about 1.3 billion by scrapping the development authorities and transferring the functions properly to the district assemblies as by law established. You still came this year and you did not fulfill that promise. You came and still asked that we should allocate monies for development authorities. To do what? To do what? Now, these development authorities, and that is why I asked the question, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, where did he get this type of experiments from? Today, the development authorities have all their contractors abandoned sites. They have bills totaling close to 2 billion Ghana cedis. To complete those projects with the current price increases, you must give contractors price fluctuations, which will lead to our outstanding bill to about 4 to 5 billion Ghana cedis. This is what Bawumia has done. When he said he was going to give every constituency $1 million, we are ending up with every constituency with debts. And the cumulative debt position on these development authorities is in the region of 5 billion Ghana cedis when they adjust for the price increases on their contracts.
Ghana's gold.
I mean, and you still want money to go and fund this kind of expenditures. How is that reasonable? That at the time when you are telling the whole world that we are so broke, we can't pay you, you still want your children to take dessert. You still want your children and you and your wife after dessert drink wine and whiskey. And you still want, when you are going to bed, you sleep on the most comfortable bed in the world, probably worth $20,000. That is only a mad person who does that. Any reasonable person in this situation, the first signal you will give is that, look, I am willing to sacrifice a lot of my comfort and to be in there with all of you and to suffer it with you. Especially that I have decided that I don't have money to pay you over 400 billion that I owe you. And next year alone, the interest on those payments is about 61 billion. So if you add it to what we are owing, we are probably, because the 400 billion is just an estimate, because we are almost at the 500 billion mark. If you add next year's 61 billion interest payment, we are heading towards 600 billion. You say you will not pay. And yet, you still want to live a very luxurious life. Isn't that an insult to the psyche of Ghanaians? Isn't that a sign of a hopeless government led by a hopeless president who basically doesn't care about the future of our country?
So your suggestion is that if they want those measures, and if those measures will make any impact, they will also need to show that they are cutting the expenditure.
He was arrogantly saying that he will still have to build a cathedral to God for all the mercies and the mercies that God has bestowed on us. Is this the mercies? When God gave us this group of criminals, how can that be mercies? When God gave us this group of people to come and punish and destroy our country into the future, how can we be celebrating this as mercies of God? How can we be celebrating Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, the biggest threat that ever happened to our country, as mercies of God? Or Keno Foriata, who from day one has put his interest above the interest of Ghana, as mercies? Or Akufo-Addo, when in the midst of all our pain, he was chartering flights all over the world and would not listen. How is that mercy to be celebrated? I'm sure God intentionally brought them to come and punish us for some sins that we probably have committed that we do not know. Otherwise, these cannot be mercies. And at committee, we made it clear that we should remove the cathedral from the estimate of the Ministry of Tourism and pass the rest. This was agreed only last night for them to now put up a notice that we should come to a meeting today again on the cathedral that we have settled. In other words, they want to find a way to still finance the cathedral. At a time that you cannot pay people's money, that is the time you are wasting money on the cathedral.
So you clearly had an agreement that they've decided to go back on.
Yesterday, that's what we decided. We all agreed on both sides that we should present a majority decision which reflects the fact that the Ministry of Tourism budget should be passed minus the cathedral. They went back and they've called a meeting for today again. That cathedral alone, this will be the fourth meeting in this budget window.
On the cathedral alone?
Alone. Fourth window. I gave them a tall list of documents to be required for us to establish due diligence. They have not responded. 339 million that you spent, the cathedral says we should ask them. They brought out 225 million. 140 million or more is not accounted for. And we agree that we can't give them further money. But last night, obviously Carlos Ahinkra, the hatchet man who is using this for his own interest, I don't know what he has gone to discuss with them. Is insisting that we should come today again at 11. Is that how you behave when you are broke? Is that how you behave when you cannot pay your creditors? Imagine that somebody took Keno Foriata's money and said he cannot pay at Data Bank. And the next time he saw him, he was driving the latest, most expensive vehicle in town. Just cleared. The next time he heard, the man has bought a car worth $2 million and has air freighted it into Kotoka. He will go and clap for him. Is that what he will do? But when it is Ghana that you are running, you treat people's money with disdain. You are basically wiping off our financial sector. The banking sector stands to lose about 75% of value. For a banking sector that was so-called clean with 25 billion, that banking sector today will be worth nothing. And we stand the danger of wiping out the financial sector. Our pensions that will see us through after 30 years of work is being jeopardized in search of $3 billion. And you say that these are mercies to be celebrated. These are blessings to be celebrated. Look, the 25 or 30 billion that they issue, now they are saying that even that one they cannot pay. The debt that they used to clean up the banking sector, they cannot pay. And these debts are sitting on the books of Bank of Ghana, which refinance some of them, and CBG. CBG's entire asset is in this security. And now CBG is being told, technically, that government cannot pay you. So those things that you have sitting on your books, you better write them up because they are just a sheet of paper. I mean, who does that? Financial institutions have to revalue all the government bonds because the government bonds are no more available for trade. And the reporting should demonstrate that those bonds now are worth nothing. And if you write off the losses on those bonds, by December, our banks are going to end up with balance sheets that are in the negative. Who does that? Who does that? And yet you say you won't listen to them. You gave them 19th, they said they won't do it. Now you say you have extended it to 30th. And just as they were trying to even understand what you want to do within this period up to 30th, you now hate the international capital. Tell them that I'm unable to pay the debt that the interest that I've accrued now, and I'm owing you about $3-4 billion. I don't have dollars to externalize it. You just pretend as though you are trying a restructuring, when in fact you have accumulated offshore obligations close to 2-point-something billion you cannot pay. You don't even have the dollars to pay. You just keep printing CDs. Now the CDs don't mean anything to international financial obligations when you don't have dollars in the country. The resurgence of it is basically at the mercy of speculators who misread the circular on the IMF staff level agreement and thought that some $3 billion was coming into this country in the next 2-3 months and started selling off their dollars to provide liquidity in the market, and that's where we are. Yesterday, the dollar was beginning to get angry again and was beginning to go up because they have now realized that they have processed the information and they are quite certain that, okay, it's not as if some $3 billion is coming now. They are still struggling. What they are actually celebrating is what we call a memorandum of understanding. It's actually what do you call it? An agreement of intent. It's not an agreement that has been reached and approved by the IMF. And you are celebrating this. Then is it not strange that these were the people who celebrated with Kinky and Fish when they borrowed and ran away from IMF and call it the people something? These same people are celebrating going back to the IMF. So what is your position with IMF? To celebrate to be released from bondage. You go back to the bondage, that one too you are celebrating. So what group of confused people are these?
So
what group of people are these people? And they know no shame. And I'm surprised of our country. Imagine John Mahama had done 10% of what is happening. They are broken loose. But of course, yesterday I listened to City, and they have these pseudo academics who are politicians, basically doing biddings. I was shocked when I listened to Professor Peter Kuti yesterday. And I was wondering that is what he teaches his students in the classroom. Comparing Ghana to a company that has defaulted. And that when a company defaults doesn't mean that it can borrow again. When it's able to get its fundamentals and your economic statistics and whatever together, you can come back to the market. I don't know whether the market is in his father's room. That investors will just give you money again. The pricing of those future securities will be mind-boggling because investors must price this obvious risk into our bonds in future. That is if even they are willing to deal with us.
So clearly, you are still where you are. You haven't changed your mind about not approving the increases in VAT, the e-levy,
The direction I have from my leadership at committee is that I should not approve and support the cathedral at committee.
Okay.
That I should not support the imposition of additional VAT at committee. And that I should not support the removal of the threshold on the e-levy at committee. When I do that and committee retains a majority decisions to the floor, the rest of the work is out of my hands. It is now left with leadership to demonstrate commitment and mobilize and shape our members to deliver what they said we should do at committee. That is the situation.
In fact, when you said it, I wrote it down. It says 75% of the value of banks are gone.
In terms of their investment in government securities.
And then you also talk about the fact that nobody can manage this situation. Can easily, perhaps, maybe you're suggesting that can easily manage this situation, no matter who you put in. It will take some time.
When you have done what we have done, you see, the capital markets is built on trust. That trust is that people who have excess money and are willing to give those monies to people who have deficit money requirements, that the agreements that we reach are sacrosanct. And at any point in time, those agreements will be met. And that there is a market in which when I need the money before the agreed dates, I can go and collect my money from another person and hand over that obligation to that person so that that person can keep it until the due dates arrive. We call it the secondary market. Now you have destroyed the primary market for Ghana because Ghana can no longer issue fresh debts. You have destroyed the secondary market. In other words, those who already have interest in government bonds cannot go and sell it to the next person because the next person will not be buying a bond that already is being defaulted or already there's a signal that it will be defaulted. So you are holding a piece of paper now stuck in your hands. But at least you know that it means you must keep it to maturity. If it is 20 years, 10 years, 5 years, you must keep it to maturity and go and collect your money. But in the meantime, you know that you will be paid the interest or the coupons every 6 months. Then you hear that in addition to the fact that you cannot sell it to the next person because there's no secondary market functioning for this bond, you are not going to get the interest anymore. And as a matter of fact, you won't even get the principal if you were to hold it for 100 years. That is what was announced yesterday. Now what happens to you? If this is the only savings you have from your entire work and even including your pensions, that when you went on retirement and they gave you your money, you decided to trust in government's ability and government's promise to be truthful to this arrangement and gave your money to the government of Ghana. Suddenly you wake up and they say that piece of paper that you've been collecting the interest on, nobody will take it from you again. 2, the interest too will not come. 3, you cannot even expect that if you were to hold it to maturity in 10 or 20 years, the money will be paid to you. Your wealth comes to an end immediately. And it is some Oforiata sitting in Ghana who, by the stroke of the pen, arrogated to him the powers to decide how the contract you have signed with him should be run from now onwards. What arrogance is that? And he's not even told you anything. You were just reading something on social media and something popped up. You were curious, you read it, and this is what it is. Your $1 billion that you put in Ghana that you've been spending for suddenly has disappeared, and you have zero in your hands. How is this something to still be quoting the Bible? You still were quoting the Bible. You wake up and say nothing is lost. How can nothing not be lost? Because it is not your money. You don't care about human life. All you care about is to talk through this and find a way for the next 2 years and leave this country for us. But let's ask a question. How can you go and be crowned a chief? You come home and you appoint your kinsman to destroy your kingdom together with you. Does Akufo-Addo think that any reasonable chief would use his own kinsman to destroy the kingdom he so inherited? But this is what happened. And when I called them the Achim Sakawa Mafia, there was crying all over the place. We hadn't even seen the worst of them. At the time, I christened them the Sakawa boys. Now the chicken are coming home to roast. It was on your station in 2017 that I told you people that Ken Ofori-Atta will surely be the biggest risk to our financial system. You didn't believe me, but the chicken have come home to roast.